Hi friends, how are you doing today? Today I'll be picking up from my previous video on ancient Chinese architecture as visualized through cave wall paintings in Dunhuang. I linked my previous video below in the video description. In this previous video, I introduced the Mogao grottos in Dunhuang. I talked about the importance of grotto wall paintings in filling in blanks in architectural history, and I showed some really cool examples of architecture depicted in wall paintings from before the Tang Dynasty. Today, we will start with the Tang Dynasty, which spanned years 619 to 907 AD. The Tang Dynasty is often divided into three parts. So the early Tang, which goes up to 705, the High Tang, which goes from 705 to 781, and Late Tang, which goes from 781 to 907. And today, we will focus on this first part, the early Tang Dynasty. Before we dive in, let's settle an important question. How accurate are the depictions of architecture in these cave paintings? Well, I think we'll never know for sure, but the consensus seems to be that they seem to be quite accurate in terms of reflecting the important styles and motifs of the architecture of the times. So here I am showing you a side-by-side comparison of a Tang Dynasty mural from cave 445, dated to the year range 650 to 755 AD, so which is part of the High Tang, and the principal hall of Nanshan Si, which is the oldest existing wooden structure known today, and it's dated to year 752. Now, need I say more? And in many cases, I think there's reason to believe that the actual temples that are depicted are more grand and more elaborate than their depictions on the wall paintings. So here I'm showing you a depiction from cave 148, also dated to High Tang. We see a large compound in the middle and one small compound on each side. And here, actually, we see some further divisions on each small compound, dividing the small compounds into the front portion and the back portion. So we can say maybe a total of 5 compounds or courtyards are depicted. Now, how many compounds did actual temples have in Tang Dynasty? 2 examples according to historical records. Dazhen Si in Chang'an was recorded to have had more than 10 compounds and a total of 1,897 buildings. So if we assume equal sizes, then that's approximately 150 buildings per compound. Another example, even more grand, Zhangjing Si, also in Chang'an, was recorded in Chang'an Zhi to have had 48 compounds with more than 4,000 buildings. So my personal opinion is that these cave paintings can probably be taken as pretty realistic depictions in terms of architectural style and motifs, and are not exaggerations in terms of how grand these temples were. If anything, they seem to underrepresent the scale of the actual temples. For example, in early Tang murals, we actually don't see depictions of palaces matching the extravagance described in historical literature. And we only see depictions matching descriptions of early Tang palaces in High Tang wall paintings, suggesting a lag time for artists to take the architectural forms they see in the real world and paint them into the imagined Buddhist world. So now with that said, let's dive into early Tang Dynasty wall paintings. Tang Dynasty was extremely prosperous and extraordinarily culturally rich, and this richness is definitely reflected in Dunhuang cave paintings from the time. Starting early Tang, we start seeing the use of a whole wall for one sutra transformation painting. And this is great for us because architecture is not the center of these paintings, since the main structures described in the sutras are platforms and pools. So architecture only serves as a background. So then the bigger space allotted per sutra painting, the more likely we'd see more detailed depictions of architecture incorporated into the paintings. And since we now have an entire wall for one sutra transformation painting, we do start getting some really neat depictions of architecture. So I'm going to start by taking you through some basic building arrangement motifs that would have been used in palaces, temples, residential compounds, as reflected in early Tang murals. And then we're going to zoom in and look at some really cool examples from the wide range of building types that were depicted in these murals. An example here is from the northern wall of cave 341. The main painting, which is a giant painting of Maitreya Sutra transformation, isn't shown here because it has no central architecture and only has platforms. Shown here is a small snippet from the peripheral sky portion of the giant painting. And this is a depiction of a Tiangong, or floating palace. So it's super cool to me how depictions of real architecture is imported into the background of sutra paintings. So context here for why this is depicted as a floating palace in the clouds is that the sutra tells us that when the Maitreya Buddha was a bodhisattva, they lived into Sita heaven, which is a heavenly realm. And so anyway, here we see a main hall and two pavilions connected by corridors, from which we can see one type of floor plan motif used in Tang palaces and temples, which is one main hall, two pavilions in line connected with corridor. So that floor plan is shown at the corner here. This combination kind of resembles the Chinese character shen, and so it's therefore sometimes referred to as the shen-shaped combination. Some more examples of the shen-shaped combination with one main hall, two pavilions connected and in line. So here is an example from the northern wall of Cave 205, which is an Amito Sutra painting. We see the two-floor central hall here and one side of the shen shape, right, with a two-floor pavilion connected via a corridor to the main hall. And to the left of the side pavilion, we see another detached two-floor peripheral pavilion. So mirroring this on the other side, we now have here a total of 5 two-floored buildings. Again, interesting to note the creativity of importing architecture to fit the story of the sutra. This is a temple on water. Here is another example of the shen-shaped combination from Cave 338, again in the context of a depiction of the two-seater heaven. The roof on the main hall is a Wu Dian Ding, or hip roof, a schematic of which is shown on the bottom left here. And this is clearly accentuated and emphasized compared to the side pavilions. The roofs on the side pavilions are Xie Shan Ding, or hip and gable roof, and this difference in depiction helps establish the main hall side hall hierarchy. Here is yet another depiction of the two-seater heaven, this time from Cave 215, except this time with a slightly different floor plan. This time we have a main hall, again with two symmetric two-floor pavilions on the side, arranged in a flat line, but this time detached. This combination is a continuation of Sui dynasty depictions of the floating heavens and could suggest the continuation of this combination as a basic combination type in palace and temple constructions. Here is a variation of the inline motif. This is from Cave 321, where the inline pavilions are connected with corridors. This thus now resembles the character Tu because the middle main hall is bigger and is referred to as the Tu-shaped floor plan. I'm going to make a side comment here that I love how Chinese characters are like word pictures. The way these characters are used here in this context have little to do with their meaning, and yet it somehow fits perfectly. Okay, so now we've seen the shen-shaped combination. We've seen the Sui-style detached inline combination, and we've seen the Tu-shaped combination. So now let's look at some slightly fancier developments. In early Tang, we start seeing more and more elaborate motifs. And so here is an example from Cave 329. This is an example of a newly emerged ping-shaped motif. Here again, we have 3 separate components, but unlike the flat inline Sui-style arrangement, we now have a depth dimension vividly illustrated by the Chinese character ping, where the main hall is near the back and the 2 side pavilions are more in front, making space for a courtyard in the middle. This is another common floor plan in palace, temple, and residential compounds alike. Here's another example of the ping-shaped floor plan. Here we can see some nice platforms at the bottom of the pavilions, and we can see the detailing of the dogong as well. Now, taking a small leap into high Tang murals, just to complete the basic floor plan repertoire, here is a mural from Cave 225 that shows a fancier variation of the ping-shaped floor plan, where the halls are now connected with corridors so as to look like the Chinese character Ao, with a nice lotus pond in the surrounded space. And this is referred to as the Ao-shaped combination, and it's very common, especially as we go into high Tang in the next video. And so these are the basic arrangement motifs for the temples depicted in early Tang murals. And now let's zoom in and look at some examples of the wide range of building types that are depicted. In early Tang murals, we start seeing more varied and more advanced building types. Here, from a painting in Cave 341, we see 3 faces of an octagonal hall. This is an example of what I mentioned as the architecture to sutra painting lag, as this is one of the early examples of octagonal halls in wall paintings. But according to historical records, octagonal halls already existed as early as in the preceding Sui dynasty. And of course, a known and very famous example of an actual octagonal hall from early Tang period was the Wuzetian Mingtang Hall in Luoyang, which was dated to year 687. This is a 石雕小店, or small stone-carved hall, from Cave 220. Notably, it is the only one of its kind within all of the murals in Dunhuang. It's filled with some really cool patterns, has a hip roof that does not have zhiwei, which, if you recall from my previous videos, are ornamental beast tails at the end of the ridge poles topping a roof. This is an example of 二层楼, or two-floor tower. Now, compare this example of 二层楼 to this example of 二层阁, which is two-floor pavilion. And so here we see a nice side-by-side comparison illustrating the terminology distinction. If the bottommost floor is in line with upper floors, as like the same style, then it's a pavilion. If the bottommost floor is a hall, then it's a tower. In early Tang sutra paintings, pavilions and towers are quite distinct. So now, applying our new knowledge, this would be another example of an 二层楼, two-floor tower. Here we can readily see the dougong on both floors, and also we can see detailed beam positions. And here, applying our knowledge again, because the bottom floor is the same as the upper floor, these are two more examples of pavilions from Cave 321. Again, here we see how architecture is integrated into sutra depictions of heavenly realms. Here's an example of a 屋顶歌台, a performance stage on the roof. It's a small hall with a platform on the roof to elevate the performers, making it easy for large crowds to see them from the ground. This type of performance platforms are seen quite often in early Tang wall paintings. And to close off, here's an example of a 七层灯楼, 7-floored candlelight tower. These are temporary small-scale buildings, and in the cave painting, it is floating on water, and every floor is filled with candlelight. These light towers are very much real, and up until early 20th century, every year on 正月15 in the lunar calendar, which is the 15th day of the first month, otherwise known as 元宵节 or Lantern Festival, many such light towers would be erected at the heart of Dunhuang with Buddhist paintings hanging from them. So I just want to end with a little reflection. I want to say that I felt extremely humbled looking at these paintings. Today we always hear people telling us how much advancement we're making, particularly on the technology front. And me being a bioengineering student, sometimes I am guilty of spreading that propaganda. But I think looking at these paintings is really a great reminder that progress and development are not a one-dimensional space and are definitely not linear. And when we gain something in one dimension, we lose other things as well, sometimes in other dimensions that are arguably more important. I really wish sometimes that I could stand on a starry night in front of one such candlelight tower, admiring the flickering lights dancing away, or have some wine with my friends on a riverboat and pen some poetry in one of these gorgeous pavilions, or watch an early Tang performance on a 屋顶歌台 rooftop stage, where musicians will be playing many instruments, some of which have already been lost forever. And with that, thanks for watching and see you next time.